Some more work done on the heating in the forwarder. Found a very small leak at one place and looked over the hoses leading up to the hydraulic tank. Looked like they had a little leak, but feels like it's oil on them. Also found a leak under the... We have moved the hose clamp around a little and it was leaking a little at the hose under the expansion tank, and also one that connected at the top that we had pulled off to fill up. My dad took it for a little test spin to see if it was any better today. It was hot to start with, but then stopped working, and the lights that were installed stopped blinking, so something is acting up with the magnetic valve. Had also noticed that the pressure sensor was leaking a little. It has the molded plastic in it, so it was just removed and a new one installed, and looks all good right now. No matter how hard we tightened up this hose leading from the diesel heater back to the back in the machine for the heating element, we couldn't get it to seal, so we decided to change. It felt really stiff and hard, impossible to get off without cutting it. It was also routed under the diesel heater for some reason. I think it should be coming out the top and going straight back. So if we had a minor leak, maybe air was trapped in the system, was the reasoning why we did this to start with. Cutting the new hose to length and routing it now on top. We also added a little bit of rubber on there to protect it where it might be rubbing against the cab once tilted down. Secured it with some zip ties. The leaky hose connecting to the top of the expansion tank was little tricky to get to, because it connects down at the top of the water pump and very limited room. Pretty impossible to get any good video, but getting a screwdriver in there and loosening the clamp, pulling the old one off, and just installing a new hose. Some zip ties to secure it in place. Noticed some coolant when starting it, but it was just stuff that had been spilled that was burning off. Still working on the heat in the cab. We were out today. It was really nice and toasty to start with, but as my dad tried turning it down a little, it started having some blinking on the light we've installed, so it seems to operate turning on and off the heat into the package, the heating element, and then all of a sudden it stopped working and got colder and colder. So we suspect a magnetic valve right now, and right now it seems to be blowing hot air. So I'm gonna start turning it down a tiny bit until it starts cycling the switch. For some reason we get low coolant even if we don't have low coolant. When turned down, it starts cycling, and it does that for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden it jams in the cold position, so it turns light off to give it order no power to it, and it should bring heat. Tapping it resolved it, so we have decided to bring it out and look at it better, and we are going to change a few other hoses that feel old and stiff. So we unbolted the hoses in the back, actually started the diesel heater quickly to let the pumps flush out some coolant to have less of a leak, once removing things under here. So it was just to start unbolting the clamps. Some of the hoses needed to be cut, damaged a little, so they were easier to remove. We were able to get the magnetic valve out without too much of a spill and too much trouble. We've made a little piece of cable and a connector to be able to test drive it, test operate it in the garage. Once it's been powered and you let go of power, it didn't want to release fully, so a couple of taps it opened up as it should. Blowing on it, you kind of needed to like blow a little, but not really hard, so I can't really see any real issues. But let's open it up and see what it looks like inside. So, and here you have the coil and the metal piece that the coil pushes on, and you have a cone sealing. It's nothing really, we couldn't see any visible damage, no real issues why it shouldn't operate. We found a used unit in a box that came with the machine, so we ended up replacing it with that. The hoses going up to the heating element itself were removed because they were old and hard. They were a little smaller than all the rest for some reason, so we had to buy more hose before we could put it together. Cut those narrower hoses to length, found some suitable size hose clamps. And then it was pretty much a matter of installing it. It was a little tricky. I was up in the cab and it was tilted up to be able to get the pieces in place. And then tightening things up, remounting the magnetic valves. Once we did get everything in place, we tried running the diesel heater. It did the same as before with the air in the system there, where it started and stopped and cooled itself down and restarted. And so we were squeezing hoses to help it get the air out, and also remove that small hose up to the expansion tank and topped up that. Had found a new rubber nozzle for the airbox. It should be bigger and go on the outside, but this could be squeezed onto the inside, so did that for now at least. Hose clamps up in on the heating element. Also found a leak here. They didn't have enough hose to replace it, but could tighten it up to the point it stopped leaking for now at least. Once the diesel heater was running without starting and stopping, and we got enough air out of it, we tackled the busted threads on the lock bolt for the cab. Just a tap from the inside, and then using the bolt, also feeling that it came out easily. Forced that out a tiny bit more, and now it can be bolted in place really easy. As far as the heat, once everything was up and running, once turning it down a little, the magnetic valve still jammed up on us. So we found that through this hole you have good access to be able to tap it. Maybe it was just a little bit of air causing vacuum or something in it. We have been running it for a few hours after this, running flawlessly.